My name is Gaurav Rishi. I'm the VP of Product at Casting by Veeam, and thank you for joining us. I'm here to talk to you about Casting K10 on AWS. We're going to cover a lot of ground, talk about Kubernetes ransomware protection, and all the other interesting things that Casting by Veeam and AWS are doing. So let's dive right in. First of all, Casting K10 by Veeam focuses on these three use cases, which are here and now, and help you make your Kubernetes clusters and applications get into production so that you can back up and restore your applications for regulatory compliance. You can even do disaster recovery. And this, by the way, can be done across regions, across AZs, across even multiple and hybrid cloud environments. We have self-service, RBAC-capable portals, which allow you to move at DevOps speed. And we can work across multiple data services, and we'll get into some of that as we back up your entire Kubernetes application. And the third use case is application mobility. It is increasingly common to have environments which work across multiple clusters or multiple environments where you might need to move your application from Kubernetes version A to version B because Kubernetes versions move at fast paces and there's a release every quarter. You also want to make sure that you can move your test and dev clusters and do this in a seamless way so that you don't need to rewrite your application. You might have written your application using spinning media as your underlying storage, but when you want to move it to production, maybe the storage class has changed and it's SSD. Casting K10 allows you to do that seamlessly. So let's get under the hood and figure out how Casting K10 works. The first point is Casting K10 uses applications as a unit of atomicity. So if you look at a sample cloud native application, which is what you see in the dotted blue line, it's made up of multiple microservices. There might be a pod which is connected to a persistent volume, in this case, a storage with a persistent volume claim, a PVC. There might be a second microservice. On the right, you see another pod connected to a data service. This could be an Amazon RDS, for example. And for a Kubernetes applications, you have multiple Kubernetes objects, like your config maps, your secrets, things which keep your configuration, your network, and your compute information that is representative of your application together. So when you go ahead and back up something, you need to back up your entire application. Your old tools that worked in a hypervisor environment don't work in this because your pods are constantly getting rescheduled into different nodes. Also, it is not sufficient to go ahead and just back up a particular data service. Because at the end of the day, from a business environment perspective, what you want backed up and then restored is this entire application. So as soon as Casting K10 is installed in your cluster, it'll automatically discover this entire application and also be able to interrogate and figure out what the dependency map between pods, PVs, and PVCs are. When you create policies to be able to back up hundreds of applications that you might have in your environment, you can create this automation scheme where the backup can be also put into an object store like Amazon S3, abstracting away your underlying infrastructure so that when you want to restore in a different environment, you can do it seamlessly. And I talked about transforms in the previous slide that come into effect too. And all of this can be done in a coordinated fashion. So there are a lot of times where you need to make sure microservice 2 comes up only after microservice 1 has been rehydrated. You can specify all of this through easy-to-use extensible blueprints that Casting K10 has already created for a variety of commonly occurring applications and data services like Amazon RDS or Postgres. But we also allow you as an enterprise or as a partner to extend those. So now let's talk about how Casting K10 sits with AWS and how we are innovating together. So first of all, at the bottom, as a part of the shared services platform, we have Amazon AWS with a rich set of services. This includes your storage infrastructure, both your block, file, object, EBS, EFS, S3, and then you have a growing number of container deployments that AWS supports. It could be EKS, or it could be upstream Kubernetes as a version. Casting K10, which is a core product from Casting, is a software-centric product. which sits and gets installed with a single click or a single Helm line command on top of your AWS cluster. It supports a variety of data services. So there is tight integration with things like the database layer, which sits on top of a common Kubernetes application. And K10, like I was alluding to in the previous slide, has rich blueprints for a lot of the common services that you see sitting on the logos here, whether it's Mongo or whether it's Postgres or even RDS. Canister is an open source framework which allows you to create these workflows and extend them so that you can specify what the post hooks or pre hooks or workflow actions required are to capture the dependency maps that I talked about. Casting K10 is also deeply integrated with Amazon EKS. We can do the entire application capture so that we can go ahead and make sure that you have granular rules to not only back up your application, but pick and choose the components that you want restored when the time comes. From a security perspective, you can have Casting K10 take an assume rule, and we can go ahead and work to restore your applications across AWS regions or clusters or availability zones. Casting K10 also supports other Kubernetes distributions, whether it's Red Hat OpenShift or upstream Kubernetes. And then to install Casting K10, like I said, it's software. You can have a simple click from your Amazon marketplace with flexible billing models. It can be pay as you go. It could be on a license basis, which is based on the number of nodes. So we don't tax you as your data grows, like most enterprises do. And we can also have portable bring your own licenses, where you can buy the license from hundreds or thousands of channel partners that Casting by Veeam supports today, and then bring them over to your AWS environment. And last but definitely not the least, Casting K10 also has a fully featured license, which is node limited. And you can go ahead and also try that out in your environment and see for yourself. So with that said, let's talk about how customers are using Casting K10 with AWS. So this is a sample picture. It's a little busy, but let me walk you through it. What you can actually see is that this is a global 10 customers. So one of the biggest customers in the world. It is a financial arm, so security is extremely important. And they have lots of applications running in an AWS environment. And in this particular case, they're using Amazon EKS as the Kubernetes distribution. They have multiple availability zones where these applications are running. There are 3 that you see in this picture. Under the covers, the applications that they have are using Amazon EBS. They're using multiple volumes of that, plus other storage, both file and object. They're also using a variety of data services. You see PostgreSQL and you see MongoDB, but that is just represented. They are actually growing the number of data services that are being used in these applications. Casting K10 is something that installs and takes a minimal amount of footprint in terms of the pod usage and node capacity in the availability zones where your customers' applications are running. So it gets installed, it uses the assumed IAM roles like I talked about, and it automatically goes ahead and discovers the applications. It gives you a very easy to use interface on the user interface side to be able to set policies. And those policies could be how often should the applications that have been discovered or will be discovered as they are added to the clusters, should they be protected? Where should the data which is backed up be sent to, maybe S3? And how do we need to set up disaster recovery policies where you can actually chain together policies of being able to export data into S3 and then maybe import data in terms of bringing it up in a completely different cluster. So very flexible policy model, which allows customers to be able to go ahead and create all of these protection policies. So this is how Casting K10 protects it. But the reasons customers loved Casting K10 and used it was number one, even though they were already using hypervisor-based protection tools, like I talked about earlier, in a Kubernetes environment, you need a Kubernetes native protection tool to do justice. And first of all, Casting K10 is that tool. Second, Kubernetes is still relatively new. It's still less than 7 years, younger than 7 years old. And so you need simplicity. And so Casting K10 is extremely simple to use, like I said, all the way from the installation process to the way you can set up protection policies. And when time comes, also be able to rehydrate your applications. It also is the last line of defense when it comes to security. So security is extremely important, not only in terms of the assumed IAM roles, but making sure your data is encrypted at rest or when it's in motion as you're moving it across to have resilient backups in S3 or rehydrating it in a completely different cluster. And that's something, again, where Casting K10 takes that and brings it to a Kubernetes native environment with deep integrations with a variety of key management servers, bring your own keys as a customer, as well as providing you these self-service portals where you can move at DevOps speed and application owners get a view of only their applications. And they have the rights to whatever you have configured for them. So maybe group A can back up the applications, but can't restore and override what might already be on a cluster. But group B might be given the authentication rights to do that. And so that's where the authentication and authorization aspects are built into the Casting K10 self-service portals with RBAC. We also now talk about something which is a scourge, and that's ransomware. Now, you probably read about ransomware attacks almost every day in whatever news media you're reading about. And so the question really is, why are container-based applications in Kubernetes environments vulnerable to ransomware? First of all, as the number of Kubernetes applications that are in production increase, they become a target for hackers to go ahead and attack so that they can hold enterprises to ransom. But some of the common problems that we see, which increase the attack surface area, is first of all, over-permissioning. And this is providing a surface area where attackers can go ahead and take privilege escalations and exploit groups which have been given privileges which they shouldn't have been able to. And this could be both applications as well as users. And so the step one is make sure you know about identities and you also are giving the right level of permissions when you go ahead and provide for applications running at scale in Kubernetes environment. The second point why we see applications being vulnerable are, like I mentioned earlier, Kubernetes is a dynamic environment. You have a new release of Kubernetes coming up every quarter. And because of that, you have lots of enterprises who might not be keeping up to date with the latest security patches that come up with the next version of Kubernetes. Or in the interim, Kubernetes applications in turn might be using a lot of other vendors' products, and they in turn might be providing regular updates for critical vulnerabilities that might be found. So make sure, first of all, that you are depending on vendors who are giving you up-to-date information and patches for CVEs. But in addition to that, make sure that you're actually using those and updating your own applications and environments so that you don't expose your cluster to known vulnerabilities. And then finally, like we talked about earlier, so many enterprises don't have a backup and recovery policy in place when it comes to Kubernetes applications. You need to do that because that is your last line of defense. You should know that in the shared services platform model that AWS, for example, has, it is your responsibility as an enterprise to back up and restore your applications. The cloud does not do that for you. So you want to use tools like Casting K10 and make sure that you are actually protected because the attack models that we're seeing are getting super sophisticated. So Casting K10 takes a unique approach and is the industry's first Kubernetes ransomware protection solution, where we work together with Amazon to support immutability by using S3's immutability capabilities, where you can write once but read many times, and make sure that your data backups are resilient and are not able to be changed or held ransom. And we can do this in a very simple to use manner, where I talked about automated policies, because when you're going ahead and working in a ransomware environment, your entire operations team is under pressure and needs to get back to a known good state in a very quick manner. So policy-based automations, trying to remove human errors out of the equation, is something that is built into Casting K10. And we do this while providing you complete freedom of choice. And what I mean by that is you can have both a mix of deployments across Kubernetes distributions, across using a variety of different databases, as well as a lot of underlying infrastructure, whether it's all on AWS or if you have a mix of environments where some of your applications might be on AWS and some might be on premises. And we do this by using the next generation capabilities of providing data engines and providing you parallelism so you can work in a serverless-like environment. So with all of that said, I want to leave you with a few resources so you can get started with Casting K10 on AWS today. First of all, like I said, it's extremely simple to be able to take Casting K10, use a single line Helm command, or go to AWS Marketplace and try it out yourself. We have very rich documentation, so if you want to get deeper under the covers, try out some capabilities, you can still use the fully featured free Casting K10 edition and try it out. And from a production environment, if you want to license it, you can do it on a $ per node per hour basis. You can use Casting K10 on a $ node basis or bring your own license. And we continue to innovate. Not only do you see a rich set of case studies that talk about how other customers are using Casting K10, you can also go to the AWS website and learn more about Casting K10 and things like Bottle Rocket, how we were launch partners there and are going ahead and innovating so that even in operating systems which have been optimized for containers, Casting K10 can work seamlessly. So I hope you found this information session informative, and we hope that you get to try Casting K10, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.